So, recently returned from Tudong. For those who don't know what that means, it comes from the word dutanga. It translates as shaking off, a way to freshen up one's practice, and as it's evolved, generally it means wandering around and going, often staying outside and going for the village and alms. So we just finished this rains retreat period, which is a period of stability, which is quite useful. Where we're supposed to stay in the same place for 3 months, or if we have some appropriate reason to go, then we just do for a short period of time. But most of us were just here at Abhayagiri. And so, but it's also helpful, some of us find it helpful to mix up and go wandering around. So there's this new little branch likely starting in Humboldt County, and so we went up for a sort of end of rains retreat gathering for the monastic community, and then Sampanno and I stayed behind, and as it turned out, we ended up wandering around that area, the Humboldt Bay area, and each night we were in a different place, usually outside, and then went for alms round in a different place each morning, went for alms. So starting in McKinleyville, then Fieldbrook, Arcata, Eureka, Trinidad, and then ended up going back to McKinleyville for the final alms round. And so maybe we'll just give some brief reflections on that. Maybe just start as to why, maybe touch on that briefly, or how we ended up doing that. Personally, I've always found walking long distances quite helpful, very grounding, and sometimes, for example, would go alms round in Ukiah and then walk back, which is fair distance, but and sort of interested in tudong, but not sure if I was up for it. And then perhaps it was reading or listening to Ajahn Srito Nick Scott's pilgrimage to India that inspired me, and also asked Tankantko if he was interested to go. And so they got me on my first tudong in recent years. And I find something that also comes to mind is some advice from, there was a question and answer session with Ajahn. It's like how to generate energy. And he said, find something that you feel positive and enthusiastic about. So I find that for this practice, for me, just the planning, the organizing, the thinking about it, and then the doing it is sort of uplifting and brightening to the mind. So maybe I'll encourage Sampanno to give some reflections as to why he decided to go, or anything like that.
Sure. I guess I was always kind of into the idea of, it's on. It's not loud enough. Can you hear me? So I was always into the idea of tudong, and from time to time we'd hear the stories and stuff like that of senior monks who had done it, both in Thailand and here in America. And it was always quite inspiring, because the sort of the basic kind of ethos of it is that you just take your practice, and for the monastics, our practice is Dhamma, but it's also Vinaya, so our monks' rules and ways of doing things, and you're basically just taking that and you're going out, leaving the monastery and just going out into society, but keeping all that with you, keeping your practice with you, keeping your rules with you, and living as a monastic. So it's going out in very kind of uncertain conditions, but you're keeping your practice as a constant, and it's just very interesting and inspiring, heartwarming. The stories I had heard and my own experiences proved to be, in many ways to sort of give me a taste of that. So if I go to, thinking about like the examples I'd heard of, different monks from Abhayagiri, say like walking north all the way up to the Pacific Hermitage in White Salmon, Washington, over the course of a long time, or a monk on the East Coast who did tudong for quite a long time, and I guess the stories of people just like being generous. That's a common theme. Is that you go out there and you got to eat every day. Well, if you want to eat, then you've got to do alms round, and so you go into town and you're not asking for anything. You're not begging. You're not hinting. Nothing like that. But just from walking around or maybe standing at a place like a grocery store or a market or whatever, somehow you get food, and people are very generous. So these sort of stories of people's generosity, kind of impromptu offerings of people giving rides, people just being inspired by the sight of a monk, a religious practitioner, out in the the so-called secular world, where there's a lot of problems and strife and conflict and confusion, but the sight of somebody who's focused on, say, a life of Dhamma is, what that can generate in the world. I guess that always inspired me. So I was into it for a while, thinking about it, and I hadn't had a chance until Ajahn Ṭhitapañño had invited me to go. And when was the previous one we went on? Was that before the Vasa, right?
Yeah, before the Vasa.
Before the Vasa, we went on a shorter one, 5 or 6 nights in Sonoma County. And that was quite nice. Definitely enjoyed that experience. And so, like Ajahn was saying, I always, I felt the same way, that just thinking about it, planning for it, kind of conditioning myself. You got to learn, got to be able to walk more. Put some more miles on in the daily life to get ready for that. And I guess the sort of, just kind of getting used to that idea of uncertainty, that, you might get food, you might not. You might find a good place to camp, you might, be walking around all night and, not see anything but no trespassing signs, end up sleeping in an uncomfortable spot. So this sort of dealing with uncertainty and incorporating that into the practice was an inspiration and one of the big reasons why I chose to do this and continue to think it's a good practice.
Okay. Maybe just add to that some of the things found very helpful. And some of this I would add, whether one's a monastic or not, I think is definitely, one can extrapolate it to one's own practice, but I think just being out, mostly outside for 7 days was very grounded, and also being disconnected, given my various roles and responsibilities at the monastery. Spend a fair amount of time connected, like internet or email or whatever, and just taking a break from that. All that was also, and just being in nature. Often, not sure how many nights, but maybe 3 nights we were under one or more redwood trees, and it was very nice. One night in particular in a very nice redwood forest. And the final night we were sort of under a ponderosa pine tree, using the pine needles underneath it to stay warm and protecting from the dew, and just that connecting with nature, and then the physicality of just doing lots of walking, as people who maybe do backpacking know, is just very nourishing and grounding. and just the simplicity of it, of just very simple, just the two of us, and are we going to eat, or where should we go for alms round, or where should we camp, and just very, when will it get dark, and just going back to very simple lifestyle I found quite beneficial. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely agree. Yeah, it seems like it's kind of going, like doing tudong is kind of going like back to sort of the maybe the origins of the practice, the sort of the bare bones of the practice. In the suttas, in the Pali suttas, the Buddha talks about. You get a sense for what the monastic life was like at the Buddha's time, and the first monastery wasn't created until I don't know how many years into his teaching. Maybe it was Jetavana. But anyway, at a certain point in the Sangha's history, land was offered and kutis were built. But before that, monks were just living in the forest. And so their basic lifestyle wouldn't have been that much different from what we were, trying to, in a sense, recreate. But sort of going back to that standard of, and the Buddha talks about it in terms of the four requisites of living at the root of a tree for shelter, subsisting on alms food, that is just whatever people have freely offered into one's bowl, and not going to meal invitations or whatever. Those are kind of the two core things that kind of shape what we call tudong, or what we did, living outside and living off of alms round. And so kind of that connection to the life that the Buddha and many of his disciples would have lived. And some even chose to continue to do that even when there were monasteries. They found it beneficial to live out in nature and continue to do alms round even when there were other options. So that inspired me too, just thinking about, we're kind of, in a sense, in our own way, trying to follow in the Buddha's footsteps. And you see this sort of thing throughout Buddhist history too, that many of the great masters, Ajahn Mun, Ajahn Chah, even in other Buddhist traditions too, kind of practiced a lifestyle with these aspects incorporated in, like living close to nature and meditating in nature. As Ajahn was saying, I've definitely found this to be very grounding and nourishing, because as many people know, technology is something that it's done wonderful things for us, but also disconnects us from our maybe from our deeper aspects of our being, in terms of all the time we spend looking at screens and so forth. So returning to nature and just returning to the basics of those things that are supporting our life, that's definitely good to do from time to time, whether one is a monastic or a lay person. That's about all I can think about on that topic.
Sure. And maybe another thing just that I appreciate that Sampanno also shared is generally within following our monastic rules, the confines of that, we were generally open to trying to be open and receptive to people's generosity. Occasionally people offered us a ride, even if it's just like a short distance or whatever, and we'd accept it, and to various food offerings or coffee or whatever, tea or whatever. Just appreciating that's it gives people an opportunity to connect when you go out there with your bowl and just talk to you. There was one of my favorite interactions, which I've heard Sampanno talk about before, but it was quite nice, where a woman came up to us and was just like, I don't know what your story is, but I want to give each of you a banana. And so, And that was very nice. Very nice to just relate from a place of generosity. And yeah, something just about the symbol. I don't think, although there were a few times maybe people asked for advice or teaching, I think just the symbol of samana, people found quite powerful. And yeah, being drawn to that or wanting to connect that or wanting to support that. So, any thoughts on the topic or memorable interactions or favorite interactions?
I'm sure I can think of something. But like you were saying, I always kind of found it amazing how a lot of people would. Some people definitely had some background and knew about Buddhism, knew about different teachers, had been to Asia or something like that. But there's some people that kind of came up and engaged with us that I wouldn't have thought, might know much about Buddhism or about, what a monk is or what we're doing. But there's some way, I guess, I think about it, and it was kind of amazing in many cases, but it seems like there's some sort of archetype in the human mind and experience about a monastic or religious seeker or whatever it might be, a shaman, whatever it might manifest as in different cultures. But like the story of the lady who came up to us saying, I don't know what you guys are all about, but I want to give you this. It seemed to, in many cases, it would sort of, make a connection and touch something in people. We didn't get too many negative interactions. That's something that definitely can happen, and is part of the package. Is that when you're out there dressed like this, you're not going to know what everybody's going to think, and everybody isn't going to see it positively. But I guess those people who had a negative perception of us and what we were doing kept that to themselves. But I'm sure there's definitely some experiences I could think about, but they're not coming to mind right now. Maybe in the course of our conversation I'll think of something.
Yeah. Not too much else coming to mind. I guess for for my own self, for myself, I was as I maybe said before, I was thinking for a while that I wasn't up to it, or it was going to be too difficult. But that once really the most difficult part, having done just a couple of these recent, is just like planning and putting it on your calendar and going. But and we hear so much bad news, which is what news does. Often so many bad things in the world or in the news. So it can be a bit depressing, but it does really give oneself quite uplifting experience when one puts oneself out there like this to just be the recipient of so much kindness and generosity, and seeing the best in people. And find it quite uplifting, and to wander around as an alms mendicant in California, it works. So I'm happy.
So you left Humboldt Vihara, and what kind of food did you get that day in Fieldbrook, and then where did you stay that night?
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. We went to this tiny town called Fieldbrook Market Fieldbrook, and then there was one place.
Yeah, it was just like the fire department.
There was a fire department.
And one store, pretty
much.
One
store called
no stoplight.
Yeah, called Fieldbrook Market and Eatery. So, that was an interesting one. There's a little school there too. But and then we were.
I can tell that story. If you
yes,
like.
Please.
Yeah. So one of our rules is that we can only eat until midday, and with the daylight savings time or whatever, we at this time of year that is 1 p.m. by the clock. So it was probably getting to be like 12:15 or something like that, and we had been standing in front of the Fieldbrook Market since it opened, I think, at 11.
11, yeah.
So we've been standing there for a while, which is, that was something I realized on Tudong, is that you almost always have to stand for a while at a place, and just kind of stand there. The bowl is out. We've got our big packs. They're set off to the side, and so not too close to the door, but not too far away that it would be inconvenient for somebody. But you're sort of putting yourself in that position that people that are coming to the store will kind of look over, and maybe something will, maybe they'll start thinking, what are these guys up to? What's this all about? But anyway, not too many customers that day. Maybe it was Saturday, or I forget which day of the week it was. Friday, but kind of slow. And it was maybe 12:20 or so, 12:15, 12:20, starting to get to be that time where, to have our meal and, get out all this stuff, and it takes a while. So it was kind of crunch time for us. And maybe it was about 12:30. We didn't really have much time.
Oh, it was down to the buzzer.
Yeah, this guy comes up on his bike and he was like, "You boys hungry?" And we were like, "Yeah." And so we definitely were hungry. So he asked what we wanted, and I think we said like a sandwich or something like that. And so he
said something interesting. He said, I told my workers to ask what you want, but they were too afraid. So I never quite figured out if he owned the shop, or if they were the PGE employees that had stopped by earlier at the shop, or what was going on with that. But it was an interesting comment.
Yeah, it was kind of mysterious. But anyway, he was very, very nice to us, bought us big sandwiches and Rice Krispie treats and a half-gallon of milk. So we had a pretty good meal, although we had to eat pretty fast. But that's just part of how it goes. And so from there, we had our meal, and then from there we started walking. I guess it would have been south and east towards Arcata. And that was another interesting experience. It was starting to getting close to dark, wasn't it?
Yeah, getting a little dark.
It was getting to be kind of dusk. And so we were looking for a place to camp, but we were on one sort of kind of rural road, and then we were kind of coming up to an intersection with the big highway, so it was looking kind of bleaker and bleaker in terms of finding like unused land, on places where people obviously like weren't, didn't care about it or whatever, places out of the way. And then we kind of went to this one road that was sort of more like a driveway, and looked around, didn't look quite right, so we started walking out of it. And as we did, the guy who turned out who lived there pulled in his car and was like checking his mailboxes right as we were walking out. And what did he say?
He was like, "What's going on?"
Right.
And I thought we were upsetting him or something.
We kind of thought we were in trouble.
Yeah, because we were walking down out of his driveway. But.
And then what'd you say? You just answered.
I just answered. I just said, "We're looking for a place to camp."
Yeah, and then right away he was like, "Oh, you see that big field over there by the green building? Like, you can camp there. I own that building." Yeah. And so it was just super nice. It was obviously he was, he wasn't sort of paranoid about what we were doing or our motives or anything like that. So we head over there, and it was an interesting campsite. There was all kinds of like vehicles in different stages of
broken down bus and various odds and ends.
Yeah, but there was like a kind of a cluster of redwood trees, small ones, and we kind of camped under those, and realized that was probably our first time camping under nice trees like that. Camping under conifer trees, like pine trees and such, is a very good spot. There's not too many bugs, and stay dry for the most part. So we camped under other pines and redwoods, and that's actually another thing that you find in the suttas. The Buddha talks about camping at the root of a tree, or another one we experienced was making a place to sit and lay down on a bed of straw, sometimes translated as a heap of straw. But and like maybe our fourth or fifth night, we were invited to stay at the farm of this guy named Johnny, who was a friend of one of the people who's kind of part of the group that's starting, helping to start up the Humboldt branch monastery. And so he invited us to come to his place, and so we walked there, and his farm was kind of busy because he runs a pumpkin patch. And so it was like, you know, a couple weeks before Halloween, so there's all these kids and people picking pumpkins. But he like was taking us to different places on the farm where we could camp, and he was like, yeah, maybe the most private or secluded place is this back field. And it was like a 20-acre field with maybe 50 sheep grazing there. But it was a really nice field. It was just, you know, it's kind of, you know, some brush and stuff, so we were out of the way. And we just asked if he could spare some straw, so he brought us a bale of straw. Actually, I think it was hay. It was still kind of a little bit green. So we each made a kind of thick mattress of hay, and stayed pretty warm, I think.
Yeah, very warm.
Yeah, the ground would have been pretty cold if we didn't have that.
Yeah.
So that's another good spot that one can find in the wilderness. Any other memorable experiences of places we stayed or people we encountered?
No, I mean, just lots of tales of generosity. We went to alms round in Eureka, and twice we had the experience of somebody stopping the car, and as we were walking along and trying to offer us money, and then us having to explain that we don't accept money, but then they figured out a way to offer food instead, and just lots of experiences of generosity and kindness like that. That was one thing we had to explain over many times. Tried to receive many offers of money, but had to graciously express appreciation for the generosity, but let people know we couldn't accept it. But then oftentimes people would find a way to offer us food instead. So yeah, that's pretty much.
How did you get food the next day after leaving your little redwood grove?
Oh, that was somebody, Mike,
Saturday.
right, man named Michael had given us, in brief, had told us about the farmer's market in Arcata, which is in the Central Plaza. And so we ended up proceeding to that, walking a fair way. And at the very end, when we were in Arcata, somebody gave us a ride a little way. And yeah, that was, I don't know how many people came up to us, maybe quite a number.
Yeah, a handful, definitely.
And people were just coming up and asking us, and even when we were just sitting on a bench, people would come up and really interested and engaging, and college students and local homeless population, and a former monk, and
yeah, a former monk offered us $100.
which
That was quite interesting.
yeah, we politely refused. But yeah, so lots of interesting interactions, and yeah, I think it speaks very well for the interest in the local area, and also college students from Humboldt State University. So yeah, we had plenty to eat, and actually more than we could eat, and we shared it with various people in the area, including a nice young college student named Jose Luis, who also just relating to us from an interest in generosity, and he was asking if we need anything, and we finally, Sampanno said, oh yeah, I could use, I guess he has a thing of black trash bags in his trunk for people like us who need black trash bags, to keep your stuff dry, or as a makeshift sleeping bag, or, very useful when traveling. So he hands them out. So we walked over to Humboldt State University with him, and he was telling us all about about various things, like his wildlife major and how to hitchhike up and down California, and the benefits of a black trash bag. So,
yeah, it actually proved to be pretty useful, because the fog and the dew and the mist and stuff like that out on the coast is quite it really kind of rolls in the morning. And so one day I had my my bowl and other sort of things out, and wasn't expecting that. And I woke up and most of my stuff was soaked. But after that, I used the black trash bag and stayed a lot drier. Yeah. Yeah, so a lot of people at the Arcata farmers market had already kind of heard about the like this possible monastery starting up, that this lady was thinking of offering her land with beautiful redwoods to the monastery, and that was quite interesting that the word had already sort of spread, and many people there actually were quite familiar with Buddhism and had heard of Ajahn Amaro. And so, yeah, as Ajahn was saying, it just kind of bodes well to the possibility of starting up a center up there.
Where did you get alms on your last day on Tudong?
So, yeah, on the last day we had kind of circled back to McKinleyville after we got a ride up to Trinidad by a supporter who wanted to just kind of show us some really nice spots, and so he kind of showed us a scenic and pedestrian-friendly route to walk, after he had given us a ride to Trinidad, to walk back to McKinleyville. So we spent a night in Trinidad and then walked back on, I think it was called Scenic Drive. It was very close to the beach, and only had to walk on 101 for a short distance, and camped I guess in the sand dunes.
Underneath a ponderosa pine tree.
Under a pine tree. And then for alms round the next day, the last day, we went to McKinleyville, walked into McKinleyville that morning, and went to, what was the co-op? Eureka Natural?
Yeah, but on the way in, a man was sort of a bit, I don't know, amazed that maybe his first time he'd seen two Buddhist monks, I'm not sure. And he asked for any, if we had any teachings for him. He was one of the people who asked.
That's right.
I wasn't sure what to say, but then...
and then he asked for a photo.
Yeah, and a photo. And tried to give us money, which we declined. But I thought Sampanno gave a good answer of like, well, what do you, to somebody like that, and do I repeat what he said? What you said, as Sampanno just said, well, just the basic teaching from Avada Patimokkha of just try to avoid that which is harmful to yourself and others, and do that which is beneficial for yourself and others, and make your mind and heart pure and bright. I thought it was a very good teaching to someone not familiar with Buddhism.
Oh, that's right. And as I was talking to that guy, another person rolled up in a car and handed us these energy drinks called Alien Energy.
Three of them.
It was a very random experience.
One for each of us, and one for the guy we were talking to, and then pulled away. So,
surprisingly enough, nobody offered us cannabis the whole time, although there's definitely a lot of that going on up there.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, we did alms round in McKinleyville after that experience, and that was quite, it was a good alms round, right?
Yeah.
We stood for a while, but talked to a number of people.
Yeah.
And
there was one interesting interaction, actually one hostility but not directed towards us, where a guy came out of the Eureka Natural Foods, and then there was a scarecrow sitting there, and he basically just knocked it over, I guess just maybe an angry person or something, but just sort of. But what's interesting is before going into the store, he like saw us and was like, oh, Buddhist monks, oh yeah, it's dedication, and just sort of, I don't know, seemed to have a good impression of Buddhist monks. But, so even from him, we got positive vibes. And then I think our final offering was an older couple who were very nice, and they told us they knew some sort of professor in the Bay Area, and they were asking all sorts of questions about us, and seemed very delighted in taking care of us and providing us some nourishing food. So, yeah, maybe...
Just
wanted to ask, what was it like when you were waiting and you weren't getting any food? Like, what was that experience like? 'Cause that seemed to happen almost every day.
Yeah, it's pretty common. Just waiting, and yeah, it's a challenging experience because you're kind of just standing there, and you know that people are kind of coming into the store and like looking over, like, what the heck are these guys all about? And but kind of one of the things we try to do is just not like generally keep our eyes downcast, so we're not like kind of looking at people with expectation or happy when people kind of look our way, and then upset when people don't pay us attention or anything like that. So generally keeping the eyes downcast, but sort of engaging with people when they're if they show interest. Yeah, there's definitely an uncomfortable kind of feeling when that comes when you're standing there and the clock is ticking, and it's just you just have no control whatsoever of the situation, other than you can just stand there and practice meditation, wish people goodwill, do your practice internally. But whether or not people want to talk to you or want to give, it's totally up to them. So yeah, definitely that's a very it's a experience of uncertainty, sort of made very obvious.
Yeah, good.
Is that your thoughts?
Yeah, good practice in learning patience and opening to uncertainty. Yeah. Well, maybe that's enough for tonight.